This morning, the final 48 hours of the special session. Property tax relief still incomplete. What will end the stalemate over it? A candid conversation at the Capitol with State Senator Bettencourt. Speaker Dade Phelan now looking long-term at ways to permanently reduce the state's sky-high property taxes. State Rep Chris Turner on the committee takes our questions. The Texas Senate settled on what the impeachment trial for suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton will look like. But do those rules help or hurt Paxton's defense? And Hispanics now make up the majority of Texas. How should this state implement that into planning for the future?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. We will get to the Paxton impeachment trial a little later in our program. First, though, the headlines. Governor Greg Abbott is closing in on a record for the most amount of bills ever vetoed in Texas history. So far, Abbott has killed 77 bills, not because he doesn't like them, but because Abbott wants to punish lawmakers for not first passing property tax relief. Many of these bills are bipartisan, some written by conservative Republicans. Governor Rick Perry, though, holds the title in Texas history for the most vetoes at 83 of them. And one of the bills that Governor Abbott vetoed was a blow for people with disabilities. This was House Bill 3159. It would have helped people who are blind or paralyzed and need assistance marking their ballot when they go vote. This was the first time a bill of its kind ever made it to the governor's desk, but Abbott said it wasn't specific enough only for disabled voters. And a brand new poll out shows that half of Texas voters think the impeachment of Ken Paxton, they think it was justified. UT Austin did this survey. It found that half of Texas voters say Paxton's impeachment was justified. A third of Republicans support it, a third of them do not. And the 40% who remain, they said they did not know or simply had no opinion of it. Let's start this morning, though, with 48 hours left in the special legislative session. It ends Tuesday night, and the question is, will there be anything to show for it over the last 30 days? Property tax relief remains a hostage to politics. The House has not been back to Austin after passing its plan and telling the Senate to take it or leave it. Senators tweaked their proposal again just a few days ago and passed it unanimously. So will anything budge now? State Senator Bettencourt is a Republican from Houston who took our questions at the Capitol. Senator Bettencourt, it's good to see you again. What has the House said, or what do you expect them to say about the refreshed property tax cuts that you introduced in the Senate?
Well, first off, it's a record $18 billion. That's the largest property tax increase bill that's ever passed in the Texas legislature. And it contains a lot of the elements that were talked about informally in discussions over the weekend. But more importantly, it's a great path for all Texas businesses, all homeowners, because we've added components not only just to have eye-popping numbers for homesteads, $1,270 a year for the average home, up to $1,500, but a whole bunch of great business tax relief too.
Why did you feel like you had to refresh this property tax proposal? Is it an olive branch to the House?
Yes, because it contains a lot of good features for taxpayers all over the state. I mean, think about it. We're going to take 67,000 small and medium businesses out of paying franchise tax. Oh, we're not done yet. 1.7 million business owners don't even have to file a report anymore. It's called a no new revenue report. And so we're helping out businesses directly. And we've got eye-popping numbers to the point where over 65s are going to save in the second year of this plan almost $1,500. It's off the charts tax relief. And then the final piece, and I think it's a very important one, is we're going to lower the rollback rate, which governs how much money can schools take from taxpayers, by 30%. That means every year their future tax bill increase is 30% less. That's a huge permanent change in the landscape. And that should be something that I hope the House would jump on, because it's a great idea.
What's going to break this stalemate at the end of the day, whenever that might happen?
I think a recognition of the obvious. What's the best for Texas taxpayers? See, that's what's been missing in the debate. Because while you can pass a bill and leave town, and we're working on codifying really good ideas, And there's been telephone discussions back and forth between both chambers.
There have been telephone conversations back and forth?
Oh, sure. I mean, over the weekend, the holiday weekend, I was on the phone to midnight every night, okay, and during the day. But it wasn't just me doing it. We actually had other senators involved talking to other House members, and Lieutenant Governor was on constantly. So we're trying to come to a deal. But my message to the Texans is, look at the Senate plan. I think you'll think it's a great plan. And I hope the House members agree.
Is Speaker Phelan the one holding this up, or is it Governor Abbott?
You know, at this point in time, I can only say that there were lots of offers. The Senate made many. There was, offers that I know Lieutenant Governor approved, and who's actually saying no is up to them to describe, not to me.
This special session ends on Tuesday night. Do you have any hope that your plan is going to pass?
Sure, and if not, there's always the next day, and the next day, and the next day, because we've been working.
You're not giving up?
No, the House hadn't been here for 3 weeks, but we keep coming back, trying to come up with better plans, and more importantly, the best plan we can think of is on the table right now. It's up to the House to say, to pass it, send it to the governor, but more importantly, it's up to Texans to recognize it and help us in the process of passing it. We do only have about 6 weeks before we can get this on the ballot in November. And I want Texans to vote on it. The entire Senate wants Texans to vote on it. I think Texans want to vote on it. So let's vote on it.
Senator, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, it has long been predicted that data from the U.S. Census Bureau now confirms it. Hispanics now outnumber whites in Texas. White people had been the state's largest population group since at least 1850. That changed last year, and the U.S. Census Bureau made it official this past week. Hispanics now account for 40% of the state's population. Whites are at 39%. Ian Mitra is the senior managing editor of the Texas Tribune. He is in Austin. Ian, this is something, politically we have been waiting on for years, it seems like. The question is, I think, are we going to see any change in our politics reflected in this demographic change?
Yeah, I think, ultimately the demographics are going to spur some change, and you have to look at it historically and as well as for the future of the state too. What this means also is that, Hispanics have been disproportionately poor in this state. And so looking forward as the population and this shift continues, you have to look at the aspects of education disparities and the aspects of social mobility. So, for the future prospects of the state, I think that's going to be a major focus of policy is the aspect of closing those disparities.
Let's talk about the extreme weather we have watched all across this state over the past week. Tornadoes, extreme heat from the Panhandle all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley. Officials have really been pushing residents and citizens here to conserve energy. Is that enough, though?
Yeah, well, first thing to say about this is that, the ERCOT, the grid operator for Texas, for most of Texas, has basically, said that while there were some kind of coal and gas-fired plants that went offline because of some of the storms, the conservation was kind of an early step, and that there was never outages across the state were never related specifically to the grid. But obviously, this was again, in this legislative session, this was a topic of conversation. And the main thing that came out of it was trying to build more power primarily through gas-fired plants. And so, the main thing longer term is the aspect of some low-interest loans. That's the kind of the plan that came out of the legislature. But certainly, conservation was an early step. But, obviously, with what happened in 2021, the state will always be kind of nervous about kind of the reliability of the grid.
Indeed so. I am back to you in just a moment here. Coming up, State Rep Chris Turner on what it will take to end the stalemate over property tax relief. And does either side benefit from the rules in the Ken Paxton impeachment trial? Insight from a Republican when Inside Texas Politics returns. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. The Speaker of the Texas House, Dade Phelan, has ignored the Senate's plan to reduce property taxes by increasing the homestead exemption. But a few days ago, Speaker Phelan said he would study it long term and named a bipartisan committee to look at that and more. State Rep Chris Turner is on that committee. He is a Democrat from Grand Prairie. Representative, good to see you again.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jason.
Is this select committee a peace offering to the Senate, do you think, to try to get property tax relief finally passed?
Well, I think there's a couple different things happening here, Jason. I think we still have this ongoing debate in this special session about how to pass some immediate property tax relief for Texans. I think what the Speaker is trying to do with the Select Committee that he announced last week is study the issue in depth going into the next legislative session back in 2025.
So this is not immediate.
I think there may be some immediate work, but I think it's going to be a longer term project as well to see what the viability is of providing lasting property tax reductions for property owners in Texas, and looking at all the different ways that people have proposed to do that, whether that's appraisal caps or rate compression or homestead exemptions or a combination thereof. And I would just say that because property taxes are fundamental to how we fund public schools in Texas, public education has to be at the very forefront of this discussion.
One of the things on here is the committee will be looking at is whether the state can eliminate the school property taxes, the M&O, the maintenance and operations portion of that. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. And so there's two primary property taxes that school districts assess. There's the maintenance and operations that you just mentioned, and there's interest and sinking, which is generally how new construction is funded to build new buildings or to renovate older buildings, that type of thing, when districts go out for bond elections. But to do away with M&O property taxes, essentially the state would have to backfill the equivalent amount of money into school districts.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. You're talking tens of billions of dollars. And it's important to note that it's not as though Texas is funding public schools adequately right now. We're somewhere between 42nd, 44th in the country in per pupil funding in the classroom. We got to get that number up. And then let's talk about how the state can pay a higher share of it, which would reduce pressure on local property taxpayers. But to completely eliminate the property tax, it's hard to see how you do that without jeopardizing public education. But I'm interested to hear everyone's ideas, and we're going to get into this in the next 18 months.
Chris, do you have any indication the House is going to reconvene before the special session's over on Tuesday night to consider what the Senate has proposed?
I don't have any indication that that's going to happen, no.
How likely is that? You know the politics of Austin.
Yeah, I don't think it's likely. I think the House, the leadership decided to pass legislation that was very specific to what the governor asked for in his call. Whether you support that policy or not, that's what the House did. And I think the House has put it over to the Senate, and the Senate has to decide if they're going to take action on it. So far they haven't. But hopefully something does happen before the deadline Tuesday night. But right now I can't say that it looks likely the House would come back.
You've been in Austin for a minute. How do you think this stalemate ends?
Well, I think ultimately the governor has to get everyone together and show some leadership on this. Frankly, the House and the Senate had different property tax plans throughout the entire session, and the governor didn't get involved literally till the second to last day. And I think that's why we're in the situation we're in. So I think the governor has to get engaged more and help the legislature get out of this mess.
Representative, thank you.
Thank you.
It took a couple of days of closed-door meetings, but the state Senate finally settled on what the impeachment trial will look like for suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton. The question many are asking now, does either side benefit from these new rules? And those are questions we pose to the chair of the Travis County Republican Party and longtime political consultant, Matt Makoviak. Do these rules help or hurt Ken Paxton's case, do you think? If you're Tony Busby, if you're the defense attorney for Ken Paxton, what do you think about the rules?
Yeah, I think overall the Paxton defense team should be satisfied and reasonably happy. They're going to get witnesses. They're going to have the ability to question witnesses. They're going to be able to seek a summary judgment, a motion to dismiss at the beginning, which is only a simple majority threshold. They probably would have liked the Attorney General's wife to be able to vote, although in the end, I think the Senate made the right decision to allow her to participate, which is what the Constitution requires, but to not allow her to be part of deliberations or to vote. Overall, look, I don't think at the end of this, if Paxton is removed from office, his defense team is going to be able to claim that the Senate rules weren't fair. They're much more fair to him than what we saw in the House, where Paxton's team really had no ability to provide any information or witnesses or testimony or anything at all. They have an opportunity to have their day in court, and they're going to seek a summary judgment at the beginning. We'll see whether the Senate has 16 votes to dismiss all the charges or some of them potentially. And then depending on that, we'll have a trial.
Matt, Ken Paxton is required to be there according to one of the rules. Do you think that he will speak? And what do you expect that scene will be like? Because everyone in that room knows Ken Paxton.
Yeah, it must be interesting. Imagine being a criminal defendant, right? It's kind of an out of body experience for any of us to consider. But then imagine doing it in front of a jury of people that you know well. Generally you wouldn't know anyone on a jury because anyone that knows the defendant would be struck. So yeah, it's an unusual situation, and he's gonna have to sit there and take it all in as a defendant would. The question for me is whether he's going to testify or not, and that's high risk, high reward. Generally speaking, criminal defense attorneys, and I know this isn't technically a criminal case. I don't even know what word we use to describe it because it's not civil and it's not criminal. It's in some third category that we don't know what to call it. But generally, you don't put your defendant on the stand unless you think that the jury is at risk of finding a guilty verdict. If you don't think the case has been proven, then you don't. Then there's just too much risk. And certainly there are some bad facts here for the attorney general, certainly related to the affair, related to doing things for this donor. And I know that Paxton himself and his defense team believe he's not violated any law, and that's why he has said he's innocent from the very beginning. But he may have to answer some questions in ways that will be embarrassing, that may do some political damage, that might be hard for him to answer truthfully or correctly or fully without doing some damage. So that to me is going to be a huge question. Of course, if they get the motion to dismiss, then we don't have that at all. I think there's a chance they may dismiss some of the articles, but not all of them. That may be something to watch.
Our entire unedited interview with Matt Mackowiak there on this week's episode of Y'all-itics. Will Paxton testify in his own defense? How long might the trial last? Lots of questions, lots of answers. You can download Y'all-itics wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back this morning on this program here, the roundtable has something to say about those Senate rules. Ian, Bud, and Bernadine standing by next.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
All right, time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ian Mitra is back with us from Austin at the Texas Tribune. Bud Kennedy is a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. And we're starting with the rules for the Paxton impeachment trial. The question that I've been asking, Ian, do the rules give either side an advantage when this trial finally happens in September?
Well, when you look at how the rules came out and you saw, that largely they followed the recommendations of the House impeachment managers, mostly in terms of how the process would work. Obviously, closed deliberations was not something that the managers were going for, but you also look at kind of the reactions from the lawyers too. On the House side, the lawyers were praising the process, and Paxton lawyer Tony Busby was really mostly focused on moving forward, didn't really talk about the process at all.
Yeah, Rusty Hardin and Dick DeGuerin, Bud, the attorneys for the House managers, they seem pleased with this. Do they benefit the House, these rules?
Yeah, the prosecutors got most of what they wanted, but the committee threw one big bone to Paxton's lawyers by setting the level of proof. They said that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt instead of just, that's not in the Constitution at all. The Constitution just says this is a trial just on whether someone should be removed or not removed. They could have had, a considerable doubt or a reasonable amount of doubt, something like that. There are other legal terms, but they use the term of a criminal trial. That's going to be a little higher hook for the prosecution to jump through.
That's a good point. And Bernadine, as people may or may not know, this is not a civil trial or a criminal trial. It's a political trial.
Absolutely. But you know what? I think that one of the, however you want to put the side, I think that Senator Angela Paxton benefited quite well, because however she voted, her vote would have been questioned. But now she doesn't have to vote. So she doesn't have to, because if she had voted to remove him, then they would have said possibly that she had some kind of vendetta. If she had voted to keep him, she was standing by her husband. So I think she did very well, however anyone wants to look at it. But other than that, I think it was pretty fair.
That's a good point about Angela Paxton. Let me just ask you guys briefly, Bud, witnesses hasn't been sorted out yet. On August 22nd is when witness lists have to be filed with the Senate. Who all do you expect to be testifying?
Gosh, that is one of the questions that has come up, is how many of the senators themselves will be called to testify, how many of the Senate staffers. We'll certainly have the people involved in the civil investigations, the FBI cases, and probably a lot of the senators themselves.
Yeah. Ian, Will Hurd, the former congressman who represents South Texas and part of Big Bend area, moderate Republican, he announced the other day that he is going to run for the Republican nomination for president. I saw the news and I'm thinking, does anybody besides Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis in this state have a shot?
It's hard to see it early on, but also you kind of saw the way Will Hurd rolled out his campaign that, where the lines that he's drawing, he referred, he talked about being head on with Trump. He called him a failed politician, selfish, lawless. He's making very clear where he's going to run as the Republican who's not afraid to counter Trump.
And Bernadine, we've seen that too in the past few days from former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, really going after and attacking Trump.
Well, I think that they feel that that's one of the ways to beat Trump and to get ahead in the game, because most of those who have said that they're going to run, they're not attacking him the way that that any other kind of candidate would attack their opponent. So I think that they are trying to set themselves out from the bunch, because by the time the filing deadline for the primary, we'll probably see a lot more. So they're getting out ahead. But
at the end of the day, though, nothing has stuck to Donald Trump, and the Republican base still seems to be in his corner.
Well, there is a division among evangelicals. We see some of the faith and values evangelicals who still believe that he's their champion no matter what he does. But there's also a group that I call the law and order evangelicals, never Trump evangelicals, who don't accept what he did. They're looking for a candidate. They don't have one yet.
All right, Bud, Bernadine, Ian, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics, and hope you can join us then. Take care.